Personal finance practice problem using Excel. Home loan payment calculation and amortization table. Prepare to get financially fit by practicing personal finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet and would like to follow along, note that we're down here in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. We have the information on the left-hand side. Going to populate that into the blue area on the right-hand side. We're going to do the loan payment calculation as well as an amortization schedule. This is very useful when you're talking about a home loan type of situation because it'll give you a little bit more detail than you might have if you're just looking up the calculation on the payment, which is usually what you end up looking up when you're doing your calculations or working with someone else to try to plan or budget into the future, because the amortization table gives you an idea of the interest that would be paid versus the principal, and that can help you out with tax calculations and whatnot if you're taking that into consideration too. Note, this similar process can be done with any kind of thing when you're doing a financing of a large type of purchase, such as a car or something like that. The home loan is often the more complex one due to the fact that just the length of it is often quite long. So the standard loan, we got the 30-year fixed type of loan going 30 years into the future, which seems very, very daunting to make an amortization table for, given the fact that that's a long time into the future. But with Excel, we can do that, and we can do that fairly easily. So that's what we will practice here. Also note, of course, there's a bunch of different loan terms that could be out there. We're going to go with the standard 30-year fix, locking in the rate, so we'll have that set up for us. So we're going to say the loan is the $200,000. Note that when we're talking about the loan for a home purchase, that's not the purchase price of the home necessarily, most likely not, generally. It's going to be the loan amount related to it. And then we're going to say the rate is going to be the 5% on the rate, and we're going to say the years are going to be 30 years, and we're going to say that we pay monthly. Note, when you're talking about any kind of financing, typically they will quote the rate at the yearly rate, even though most of the times when we're financing things on the personal side, we will be paying on a monthly basis, and they will work very hard to give us the monthly amount, make it an even monthly amount so that they can see if we're going to be able to pay that, and we can budget easily for a fixed amount. So we're going to have to deal with that rate and kind of put it into a monthly rate, given the fact that we're going to be doing monthly payments. That's one of the complications we'll talk about. Then we can calculate the payment. When you're planning something like financing and you're working with someone to do so, or if you're trying to look it up yourself, then oftentimes you'll get the payment calculation down and not the amortization information. The amortization tables give you more insights, and I think it's useful to be able to put them together. Once we have this all put together, if we do it properly, we can then change our data, and we can easily say, well, what if I have a $150,000 loan? What if I have a $100,000 loan? And so on and so forth. And we can make a much more complex and nuanced worksheet than we can just basically with one just giving us a payment calculation. So let's see how that would start. Now note, when we look at this payment calculation, that's similar to the present value calculations. So the payment calculation is related to the present value as we've seen in prior presentations. I won't show that again, but we're extending on with these present value type of calculations, converting it to basically using the payment component of the present value. So in other words, just so you know, if I was to say negative present value and see this calculation has a payment component in it right there with the payment component, that's what we're solving for this time, would be the payment. So first we need to think about the number of periods. Now, if it's a 30-year loan, we're gonna say that there's 12 months, of course, each year. So that means that we're gonna have equals 30 times 12, or 360 periods that we're gonna have to deal with. But again, that's okay because we have Excel to help us. Now let's do our payment calculation. Going to start with a negative instead of an equal, and that'll flip the sign to make it a positive result. And then I'm going to say PMT shift 9. That'll start our argument. We have the rate, which is going to be the 5%, but this is where the tricky piece is. That's 5% per year, and we need it to be per month. So we're going to divide that by 12, and that'll give us the monthly rate. And then comma, the number of periods is not 30 years, but monthly periods, 30 times 12, or 360, which we put in the cell B5, and then comma, the present value is going to be the loan amount that we have up top, the $200,000 on the present value, and there we have it, and enter. So we got the 1,074 about. Double clicking on it, there's our data, 1,074. Once we have that number, then we can build our amortization table, which once again seems daunting with 360 periods, but not a problem here because we have Excel. And Excel makes it easy. So we're going to say 1 and 2, or 0 and 1 and 2, and then I'm going to copy those 3 cells or autofill them down, selecting them, putting our cursor on the fill handle, and I'm going to bring this all the way down to 360. Notice it gives us that nice little number format to help us out, gives us some help there, and we'll bring it all the way down. Say, man, that's taking forever. Are we sure we want to get into this giant table that we're making? Sure we do. It's not a problem because Excel can do it. And so then we have, there it is. I'm going to then go Home tab, Alignment, and Center. And so there we have that. Then I'm going to put the loan balance on the right-hand side. Now note, one of the difficult things on setting these amortization tables up is just to get your columns correct. So if you're doing this for a test situation, you might want to practice setting your columns up so you can build your table appropriately. But once you have them set up, or if you have a template of your tables, then it's fairly easy to populate. So the loan balance is going to be equal to the 200,000. That's where we start at period 0. The payments are all going to be the same. That's the point of the payments. Whenever they force the payment to be the same, even though the interest is going to be changing from period to period. Or in other words, the interest changing from period to period is the cost that we pay for basically having the payments be all the same. That's the confusing point of it, so that we can make the payments nice and even. So we're going to say the monthly payments we already calculated to be that 1,074. I would like to make that an absolute reference so I can copy it down. If I were to copy it down, we will do this a few times, however. So I would select F4. The interest then would be calculated by taking, this is going to be equal to the prior balance times the 5%. That would be for a year though, so we got to take that and divide it by 12 to get the monthly amount. So in other words, if we pulled out the trusty calculator here and did it within the trusty calculator, we could take the 200,000 times the 0.05 or 5%. That would be 10,000 if it were for a year, divided by 12 months, monthly rate 833.33. So then we could do it this way, which is kind of how we think about it in Excel sometimes, 0.05. That's going to be the rate for a year divided by 12. Monthly rate is that ugly small number, which is why we don't talk about monthly rates, even though we might use them in the calculation, times the 200,000, once again getting us to that 833.33. So if this is the amount that we're paying, and the interest, which is the rent that we're paying, kind of like for the use of the purchasing power in a similar way as when we were renting before we purchased the home, we just paid the rent for the use and we never get to see that money again, right? It just goes away. That means that it's going to be the difference between those two will be the reduction. So the payment minus the interest is how much the loan balance will be going down by. So this is going to be equal to the 200,000 minus the 240 in this case. So notice that the bulk of it during the beginning of the loan is going to interest as opposed to the reduction of the loan, and then towards the end that will switch and change. So if we do this again, I'm going to say, all right, the payment is again 1,074. Now the interest is going to be slightly less given the fact that the loan balance has going down. So it's going to be this 199,760 times the 5%. I'm not going to do the absolute reference right now. I'm just going to calculate it a few times. And I didn't divide it by 12. So then divided by 12. And there we have it. Then if I subtract this out, we got the 1,074 minus the 832 gives us the reduction in the loan, the 241 slightly going up here, slightly going down on the interest. That means that the prior balance, the 199,760 minus the 241 gives us the 199,518. Let's do it a couple more times, like 3 more times here. We got the payment. Interest is going to be equal to the 199,518 times the 5%. Tab, the reduction in the loan is going to be the 1,074. Hold on a second, I didn't divide it by 12 again. I'll get it right one of these times. I'm going to take that. That would be the yearly amount divided by 12. Tab. Then we're going to take the 1,074 minus the 831. Tab. Then we're going to be picking up the 199,518 plus or minus the 242. And that brings us to the 199,276. Let's see if I can do it cleanly this time. This is going to be the 1074. Interest is now going to be the 199276 times the 5% divided by 12 gives us the 830. And then we're going to take this is equal to the payment 1074 minus the 830 and tab. Now we've got the prior balance, the 1997,276 minus the 243. Let's do it one more time. This equals the 1074. This is the new balance, the 199033 times the 5%, and then take that divided by 12, tab. The reduction in the loan balance is the payment minus the amount that's going to interest, tab. And then our new balance is the 199033 minus the 244 and enter, giving us the 298,788. Let's do it again. This time we're going to just figure out what we need to do to copy it down. Then we'll use our autofill to do so. Notice that these changes are fairly small on an incremental month-by-month basis because the loan is going out so long and we got the 5% rate. But over the 30-year time period, this will have a significant change towards the beginning and end of the loan. So I'm going to delete this and do it one more time, being mindful of what we need to do to be able to copy it down. So using our absolute references and so on. So we're going to do this. So the payment that we're going to have is just going to be equal to the payment we calculated down here. That's outside of our table. I want it to be the same all the way down. So I'm going to make this an absolute reference, selecting F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 6. Remember, you only need a mixed reference, but an absolute reference works and is easier to kind of think about. Then the interest will be equal to that 200,000 times the 5%. That 5% is outside the table. I don't want it to move down when I copy down. Therefore, I'm going to make it an absolute reference, selecting F4 on the keyboard. Instead of tab, I hit tab. F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and 2. Then I'm going to divide that by 12, and I'm just going to hard code the 12, meaning it's going to copy down as we copy down as well. Hard code meaning typed it in there. Then I'll subtract these two out. This is going to be equal to the payment, the 1074 minus the 833 interest. Both of those I want to copy down. Both of those are inside the table. Therefore, no absolute reference needed on either of them. Tab. Then we got this equals the loan balance prior to this minus the 240 reduction in the loan. Both of those are inside the table. Both of those I want to move down relative as I copy the formulas down. Therefore, no absolute reference needed there either. So then we could just copy these. Now, normally I would select these 3 or 4 cells, copy them down one time, grabbing the fill handle, dragging it down one time, and double checking that it does what we think it should. This one looks correct. This one looks correct. So this one looks like it's doing what we want, and so does this. So we'll copy it down. Once we get all the way down to the bottom, the loan balance should be 0 after 30 years or 360 periods, right? That'll give us an indication that we've done this properly. So we'll grab that fill handle again, drag it all the way down to the bottom, which is 360 periods, and you can see how this would be very difficult to do by hand without some kind of computer to do it, but with Excel, done, magical, and there it is. The end is at 0. I can see that, at the bottom line here, our payments now are almost all principal. Out of that payment we made on the last one, we only paid $4 of interest, and it was all principal here. Now, notice that's not really a problem for budgeting purposes because you're saying, whatever, I can pay the 1,074. What do I care how much is broken out between interest and principal? But one, you gotta care to the point that the fact that you're paying interest is like the rent that you're paying over and above the value of the loan amount. And two, the fact that you could have tax implications on this as well that we need to take into consideration. So that's the next step you can kind of look at. If you were financing this, most of the times you talk to people, they'll only give you this number and they'll say, well, how much could you afford? And they'll just increase and decrease this number right here. But really you want to know how much interest you're actually paying. So you're kind of concerned with the interest rate and how much interest you're paying. And you then could start to think about tax impacts because in this first year, the interest, if I was to try to figure out the interest for the first year equals the sum of the interest column for 12 months would be these cells right here. So then I can say, well, that's how much I'm paying in interest for the first year, which will differ from the second year, which would be the sum of 24 up to 13, I believe, right, would be different. I'm paying slightly less interest. And when I start to talk about the tax implications, the interest becomes important. And you got to be careful with the tax implications because it gets quite confusing as to whether your standard deduction or you have an itemized deduction. Then you can take into consideration whether or not you can write off like the taxes related to it, the property taxes. And so to do all that, you can't just do that with this payment calculation, because this payment calculation doesn't tell you how much you're going to be paying in interest from year to year. The amount that you pay for interest from year to year will also change, as you can see, as you go down the amortization table. So when you start to budget out into the future, the actual tax impact of the home that's being purchased, then you want to get the amortization table so you can start to dig into some of those more details, which can be significant given the fact that it's pretty large purchase that we're taking place here. Now, then you can start to adjust things. I can start to change my data, and if I set everything up properly, it should work. So if I said, well, okay, that's kind of expensive. What if I said like 100,000 loan here? Now my payment is at the 537. I still, if I go all the way down and I did this properly, all the way down to 360 payments, should be down to 0, indicating we did our amortization table properly. We can calculate our interest from a year-to-year basis with a quick change. If I change this back up to 200,000 and say, okay, what if the interest was like 2% or something like that? Then we can see the changes that would be made to our payment and so on with this scenario as well. So if you set the table up properly, like something like this, it's a lot more easier to run projections, and it's easier than most tools that you'll see out there that might say, hey, we'll help you out with their calculation of your loan payment or whatnot, because they're not versatile. If you can set the worksheet up versatile to coincide with the needs that you need, then, and you can set it up so that you can then run changes easily over here by just simply changing your data input. That's the way that you can really get more insights and feel hopefully a little bit more comfortable about a decision like this, which could affect long-term into the future. Those long-term decisions are the ones that we as human beings are not as good with, and so some kind of standardized approach for it can make them a little bit easier.